This story is 100% true and happened to me and my best friend during the summer of 2006. This girl was my closest friend. For the sake of her privacy, we'll call her Mandy. Mandy and I spent all summer doing stupid things, building forts in the woods, exploring abandoned buildings, smoking weed on playgrounds, and hanging out at the skate park to check out the boys. We were just bored 14-year-old girls. Both of us came from messed up homes. My family dynamics were pretty abusive, and while Mandy's parents were also not the greatest, they treated me like their second kid. I was even allowed over when Mandy wasn't there. Although it was nice to have a second home, Mandy's house always freaked me out. There was something about it that always seemed dark and heavy. Even the area outside the house seemed dense and foreboding. It freaked her out too, and we were both convinced the house was haunted, despite no previous history indicating any reason it would be. At that point, nothing bad ever happened to me at Mandy's house. Mandy had a few stories about hearing bumps in the night or things falling off the shelves. Even though she was my best friend, I felt like it was possible she jumped to conclusions. Regardless, both of us always felt uncomfortable there. So if we were not taking advantage of Comcast or her computer, we were usually out in the neighborhood being typical teens. I can't recall how it happened. I was getting into witchcraft, so that could have been the catalyst. But at some point, we got this bright idea to start using Ouija boards. Again, not sure how we concluded this, but we thought creating our own board would be safer than buying one. Honestly, we just didn't have money, and I think we wanted a justified excuse for it being a good idea. In the beginning, we made the Ouija board on a piece of printer paper. We wrote the alphabet, numbers 0 through 10, and indications for yes, no, hello, and goodbye. We popped out the lens of an old pair of glasses and traced it in the center of the paper. Here's a brief explanation on how to play, in case you're unfamiliar with Ouija boards. You need at least 2 people. You sit across from each other so the board is favoring one person and opposite someone else. Each of you places your fingertips on the eye, the glasses lens in our case, and if a spirit is communicating, it will feel as if it's moving on its own, although your fingers need to lightly relax on the eye, barely touching it. It's important to know that in order for the eye to move, you need at least your finger and your partner's finger to remain on the eye, touching it slightly. Now, you might think that the other person you're playing with is moving the eye on their own account, because that is the sensation you feel. I can't speak for the early experiences I had with Mandy. Maybe she did move the eye to mess with me, but after a couple of times, it was pretty obvious neither of us were moving it. I can't explain how we had this type of trust in each other. I guess if you have a best friend, you would understand. First few times we played Ouija, we were at random places that neighborhood legends seemed cursed or haunted. Old jungle gyms, graveyards, you get it. Most of the time, it was just us giggling and freaking ourselves out. But gradually, we started having more conversations. It was actually kind of cool because it really felt like the eye moved on its own. Nothing major happened at first. The lens would move extremely slow and it would take time to spell words. The point was, things actually did happen, and after that, Mandy and I were totally addicted. We would play Ouija all the time, and we were constantly trying to upgrade the way we made our boards to make them more functional. We would find spookier places and wait until night to go there. Honestly, nothing that memorable happened. Yeah, we had some interesting conversations, and even if it was pretty creepy, Manny and me came from such messed up households that things like evil spirits intrigued us more than scared us. We were just happy something exciting was happening. Boredom makes teenagers do stupid things, and like all addictions, we had to always get more of a rise. So one day, while sitting at our house, switching back and forth on our computer to check out MySpace and Quizilla, we discussed ways to upgrade the board, and I suggested we make a new board out of a mirror. We both knew this was a risky idea, as mirrors are a controversial item in witchcraft. They're portals, much like Ouija boards and tarot cards. As such, a mirror theoretically amplifies whatever we might be calling out to. I remember looking at Mandy while her blue eyes got wide and she got this grin on her face. She pulled an old jewelry box off her dresser and opened it. Inside was a rectangular mirror pasted on the roof of the box. We ripped it out pretty easily and used a Sharpie marker to write the usual Ouija script. The mirror was too small for a glasses lens, but by then we opted out by using the lens and started using an oversized mood ring that didn't fit either of us. In previous experiences, we found the mood ring especially cool because it always turned black when we played Ouija with it. I don't know if this holds any paranormal significance, but we thought it was cool. I remember as we constructed the board, Mandy suggested we use it in her house since we were already there. The hair stood up on the back of my neck when I looked at her, and she looked at me solemnly. We had never played Ouija in her house at that point. While we were convinced the house was haunted, Mandy's house scared us. Ouija didn't. It might have rattled us or freaked us out, but we never got seriously scared. But as I said before, something about her house always made both of us very nervous. So, of course, my 14-year-old mind viewed fear and excitement in the same light. After all, it was the middle of the day and I guess we were feeling brave. I grinned at her and she smirked back at me. In that moment, we came to an agreement that could have only been made between the eyes of two best friends. We traced the ring in the center of the mirror and placed it on the hardwood floor in her room. Very lightly, I placed one fingertip on one side of the ring. Mandy did the same on her side. Usually when we played, I would start by asking, "Is anyone there?" And if it moved, usually to either yes or hello, Mandy would follow up with saying, "What's your name?" And we would alternate questions like that. Just when Mandy placed her finger on the ring, I barely inhaled, filling my lungs with the usual question when the ring smoothly guided to hello before either of us say a word. Mandy and I look up at each other, exchanging the mutual thought of, that's never happened before. Mandy opens her mouth to ask her usual question, but immediately, the ring starts scanning across the alphabet in a circular motion. Mandy and I had this happen in the past. We found that this action seemed to be the spirit exploring the board by gliding through all the letters and numbers before spelling anything. The difference between this and the previous games is, in the past, it would take a pretty long time for the eye to inch slowly and jaggedly through the board. The first time it happened, it was cool. After that, it was boring. This time, however, the movement was smooth and strong, as if there was a mechanism under the board that was moving the mood ring with a fluent, constant force. It was anything but boring. Honestly, we were so shocked with how quickly a spirit tuned in and how strong the connection was that I think we both totally blanked out on what to say or ask. The ring began to scan across the board faster, not spelling anything until Mandy finally asked, "Who are you?" The ring stopped moving for a moment and suddenly, with absolute direction and precision, spelled out, "Who are you?" "I am Mandy and this is my friend Laura. What's your..." It begins spelling out a phrase without Mandy finishing her question. "Ugly girls." Again, Mandy and me exchanged the same expression, a cross between insulted and disturbed. We didn't have time to register how we felt about the remark, since the ring continued to spell. First, it spelled out Mandy's name, then mine, then the word ugly. It repeated this process again and again. It probably spelled out the phrase at least 10 times. Each round it went faster and faster, jerking the ring so quick from letter to letter that it would fly out from under our ice-cold fingertips. Just as quickly as it had spelled out Mandy, Laura, ugly, it quickly shifted to a new phrase without any break or pause. It said, "In hell," and it proceeded to repeat this several times over again as well. Mandy and I were too petrified to say anything to it directly, but Mandy whimpers to me softly, "Laura." I ask. still hypnotized by each letter as it halts in the center of the ring, only long enough for us to see it. "You're not messing with me, right?" At the very same moment I answer no, the ring snapped to the word no. This freaked me out so bad, I had to pull my hand from the board, squeeze a fist, and shake out my hand. My fingers felt like icicles. For some stupid reason, I put my finger back on the ring. Maybe because Mandy had kept her finger on it and her pale eyes looked at me like she had seen something horrible, but I didn't say anything. I put my finger back on the ring, and this was when it started saying some really scary stuff. It didn't move as quickly as before, but it was just as strong and mechanical as it had been the entire time. I can't recall all of the exact phrasing, but when it addressed Mandy, one thing I'll never forget was it spelling, "Your father won't screw your mother, but I will." I wanted to puke. I was terrified. Then it moved on to me. It told me things I'm not comfortable with repeating. I don't even care if it takes away from the severity of the story. Just understand that this was some true shit that Mandy didn't know. One thing I will say was that whoever or whatever this thing was, it was really into calling us ugly and saying it was going to rape our moms. At one point, I remember it saying, "Satan eats your mothers, and I get the rest." Another messed up thing I recall it spelling was, "I will rape them if you don't give me your soul." Everything it was saying was making me feel more and more nauseated. Honestly, out of all the things it spelled, for some reason, the most terrifying thing was when it would snap the ring from the H to the A. The ring would slide between the letters so fast, it almost sounded like snickering. At this point, you might be wondering why we continue to use it, or how a few creepy phrases could be that scary to us. You might even think Mandy was responsible for it, like she was pranking me. Now, I adore my friend. She is a smart person, but I know Mandy well enough that even if she was capable of sliding the ring around in a way that was convincing, there's no chance she would be able to spell everything out with so much precision so quickly. And there's just no chance she could make up such horrible things that fast. I knew this was impossible for her to do without so much of a slip of the finger or a giggle. Plus, we might have been morbid kids, but we wouldn't play this kind of joke on each other. As far as us simply stopping the game, unless you used a Ouija board like we did, you wouldn't understand that there is something that hooks you in. It's like you can't stop. You have to keep talking. It's such a visceral and submerged experience. It's like every nerve is hypersensitive, every sense is sharp and refined. So even if it's just a couple passive phrases, our terror overtook every pore of our bodies, and we both felt completely locked in. That alone was frightening enough. But if all that happened were some scary phrases and this bodily experience of complete horror, I might have eventually recovered with logic and reason. I might have brushed it off and, in time, even laughed and chalked it up to our own subconscious desperation for a big reaction. But that wasn't all that happened. As it spelled out H-A-H-A-H-A over and over, with both our fingers ticking back and forth on the ring, I heard something from behind me slip, and I saw Mandy's eyes dart up from the board and behind me. I didn't have time to turn, but I didn't need to, because the item that slipped from her shelf smacked against the wall I was facing. No, it didn't fall. It was a CD case that was literally thrown. It hit the opposite wall hard enough to make a loud smack. Something about the noise reminded me of how still and quiet we had been since the spirit had tuned in. We didn't scream. I don't think we even flinched. We were already so petrified that the action froze us into place even more. In hindsight, a normal reaction would be to get the hell out of there. But Mandy and I couldn't move. It's not like we were possessed or anything. But like I said before, when you participate in Ouija the way we did, you become immersed in the conversation and you just can't leave without a formal closing. I can't explain why. It's like we were hypnotized to some degree. Even though we didn't bolt, we did take our hands off the board when we heard the CD case shift. After it hit the wall, we glanced between the shelf and the place where it landed. Consequently, we both happened to be looking towards her shelf when, very distinctly, a picture frame tilted slightly forward, hovering on just the bottom edge for a single moment, long enough for Mandy to take an audible inhale. And just like that, the picture was released and tumbled off the shelf. The way it looked, it was like someone placed a finger at the top edge of the frame and held it in place for a second before softly knocking it down. The action was so clear, it almost had an attitude that said, "See this picture? I'm going to knock it over." That was when I got fed up. I turned back to the board, and before I returned my finger to the ring, I said, "Okay, we're done now. You gotta go." My eyes signaled Mandy, and we placed her fingertips back on the ring. My heart was pounding so hard, I felt it in my throat. Immediately, the ring started to move in big, fast circles around the board. "You can't be here anymore," I told it in a loud, quivering voice that tried to sound in control. "You're banished from our board. We made it, and we decide who we talk to." That's when the ring swiftly jerked to the word, "No," and sat there, motionless. Even though the ring finally stopped moving, obviously neither of us felt relieved. We knew as long as the conversation was open, the spirit was there with us. We needed to get the eye to slide to goodbye before we could complete the game. Mandy and I softly discussed these rules between each other as our fingers remained on the ring. We concluded the easy fix would be to scoot the ring over to goodbye on our own. And this was when I went from terrified to absolutely numb with panic. The ring wouldn't move. We took our fingers off of it and tried to grip it, pushing it to goodbye, but the ring felt completely cemented in place. I don't know why, but something about the absolute stiffness reminded me of rigor mortis. It wasn't that I knew anything about dead bodies, but the blunt, unwavering stiffness of how the ring was welded to the word no wasn't human. I picked up the board, held it at eye level with Mandy, and turned it upside down. The ring didn't budge. Mind you, this is a jewelry box mirror and a mood ring with nothing in between but basic permanent marker. There is no possible way, even looking back 15 years later, not even a remote chance that the ring could naturally cling to the mirror like that. Believe what you want. If I ever needed proof of any otherworldly entity, that was it. Still holding the board upside down, my gaze shifted from this insane, impossible situation to Mandy, who was more white than I had ever seen her. She just stared at me in total shock. I think when unnatural things happen that terrify us, there's a threshold for how much fear we can contain. This bridges on adrenaline and almost anger. In a strange way, as scared as I was, I got pretty mad. I put the board on the floor and said, with all the courage I had, "You gotta go," and grabbed the board with both hands. I curved my fingers around the outside of the ring and wedged my thumbs under the edge of the mirror to force the ring towards goodbye. The tension caused my hands to shake for a brief moment. Then, we heard a snap, and the ring slid across the hardwood floor. The mirror broke in half and left a long, dark smudge of where the ring ripped across the word no. Neither Mandy or I felt any better. If anything, we were more scared. The break in mirror has a plethora of bad omens that come with it, but at the very least, it was over. For now. After that, Mandy and I discarded the board. I don't remember if we buried it or tossed in the creek. All I know was that we got rid of it pretty quick. In the days preceding, things got pretty weird. But honestly, that's a totally different story. One that shaped my beliefs and resulted in the practicing Wiccan I am now. Without going into too much detail in the post story, I will say I believe in spirits and magic, and I believe these things are real and powerful and shouldn't be toyed or tampered with. In a sense, I'm glad this happened because it introduced me to various forms of protective magic. And although I have had some creepy experiences, I never have felt uncertain of how to proceed, nor have I ever felt powerless or terrorized by anything again. I've even helped other people in haunted houses in paranormal situations. Many good things came when the fog of the aftermath cleared. I've realized the ability to be a human places us in one of the most powerful situations in the universe. To feel life, to eat food, listen to music, dance, cry, break a bone, have sex, create a painting, run a marathon. These are insanely powerful things ghosts and demons cannot do, nor will ever do. As long as I can comprehend how absolutely awesome the privilege to be physically alive is, the more I am armed with empowerment and motivation to face my fears. I believe this comes with anything we wish to accomplish, not just working with magic or talking to ghosts. All that being said, one thing I will never ever do again is play with the Ouija board. But if I'm ever confronted by that same entity that was with us that summer day in 2006, heaven help them.
December 31st, 2009. New Year's was fun and family-oriented. My family and I went to my grandparents' house in a small royal border town. We popped fireworks, laughed, played bingo, drank. I was 11, so of course I didn't drink, but wholesome fun really. 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year's. We were getting into morning territory, coming up on 5 a.m. and everyone is still up, drinking and having a good time. I'm inside in the living room, playing Gun on my PlayStation 3. All of a sudden, from the back, where all of the adults were, there was yelling and a scuffle. First thing I thought was, oh man, somebody had too much to drink and is being dumb. The back door opens and my mom is yelling furiously at my aunt. Why did you do that? What is wrong with you? Don't walk away from me. Everyone is shuffling into the house and is assessing the situation. By the looks of it, some of the adults who are outside don't even know what's happening. Turns out, my aunt, out of nowhere, slapped my stepdad for some unknown reason. He didn't know, and my mom obviously didn't either. My aunt looked in distress, like she was confused and angry about something, but couldn't articulate it. By the way, this isn't in line with her character at all. She's usually loving and confident, charismatic, and overall a warm person. She goes into her room after being persuaded to go to bed. Everyone decided they would go to sleep and deal with it all when they weren't drunk and emotional. Cool, good plan, right? Well, not 5 minutes after she goes in there. She starts to scream, guttural and violent screaming, like bloody murder, turns your stomach type of screaming. The other adults rush into the room and she's trying to fight my uncle, her husband, throwing fists, spitting, cursing, and scratching. He's obviously not fighting back, but only holds her so she wouldn't hurt him. He's struggling to say the least. He, with the help of my older brother, forced her down onto the bed, but she's still thrusting full throttle, just hammering away with the insults and the spitting. And her eyes. I will never forget her eyes. They are usually deep brown, but not that night. That night, they were black. Seriously, sounds crazy. Sounds like a horror movie, but they were black. No pupils, or I guess all pupils, completely dilated. In between her screeches and insults, she would revert back to herself. She would start pleading with us to help her, crying and begging. Then right back to screaming and fighting. My grandmother, being very religious, said this was a possession and had a gallon of holy water that she kept in her house. She got a rosary, Bible, and gallon of water, all while my uncle is still on top of her, struggling to keep her down. Keep in mind, he is bigger and stronger than her, and he was having trouble holding her down. My grandmother is saying some prayer and dousing her in this holy water. I thought she was screaming loudly before. I had to leave the room. I mean, I wasn't even in the room, just in the doorway, looking in on the scene, and I had to go. It also seemed like after she got wet with the holy water, it started to stink in the room really bad. It was like a sour, moldy, rotting trash sewage smell, a really foul odor I had never smelled before. and I've never since. My aunt was speaking in some strange language, mixed with her regular insults and screaming. There were phrases that no one could decipher. I don't know what it was, but she only speaks Spanish and English, nothing else. Not going to say it was Latin or anything, but it was not Spanish, and it was not English. They were at it, exercising, and at about 6:30 a.m., my mom had to call the father. It was a small town, so my grandmother had his home number. He was very hesitant to help. I'm not sure if it's true or not, but I've heard you usually have to get permission from the Vatican to exercise. Maybe that's why he was hesitant. Anyway, the father said, "I won't come to your house for my safety, but if you bring her to the church, I'll help her." So we did, and there it felt like a horror movie. The echoey chamber hall of the church was filled with my aunt's relentless screaming and insulting banter. Family was gathered all around, holding hands while the father flicked holy water with his free hand, while holding his rosary and Bible in the other. I remember just looking around, just taking in the situation. Like, what the hell is happening? And who's going to believe me? Do I even believe it? A few moments later, my brother and I noticed something in my aunt's mouth. It looked like a gray, thin piece of lint. My brother and I just look at each other like, what the hell is that? While she was in between violent outbursts and in a sobbing and pleading moment, my brother quickly reached into her mouth. Not very far in, because it was practically on her lips, but he took it out and looked at it for a quick second before flicking it onto the floor a few feet away, as if that piece of lint had something to do with the possession. Not 2 minutes later, after taking it out, she started to calm down and fall asleep. She was red in the face and bruised on her arm from my uncle holding her down. She was sweaty and tired. She was a mess. We all were. The day after, at whatever time I woke up, she was okay. Back to her brown-eyed, caring, loving self, and no memory of the previous night past midnight. She said she remembered the countdown and the fireworks, then nothing, just waking up and being told what had just happened. I still don't know what to believe. Apparently, this type of thing had happened once before with her in the late 80s, before I was born. She had to be exorcised by a priest then as well. I feel I need to share this nightmare that we've been living through for a while now. I bought my house a year and a half ago. It's in the Midwest, smack dab in the middle of corn country. The house is around 120 years old. Some odd things started around the first night we moved in. My girlfriend and I are the only people that live in the house. We immediately saw dark shadows darting around. We would only catch them at the corner of our eyes, but we both saw them. The house needs a lot of work, and being a handy sort of guy, I quickly started the much needed major remodel shortly after moving in. I worked long, hard days. Over time, as I continued with the project, I don't know if I got burnt out or something else was to blame, but I lost all my energy and drive to keep working on it. Fast forward to approximately 6 months ago, I started getting strange ringing in my ears. I would describe it more as a frequency sound, almost like an old dial-up modem. It became non-stop. My girlfriend started getting them soon after also, and hers became non-stop as well. To this day, we both continue to be afflicted with it. It's maddening. No end. It never stops. Last year sometime, I bought a full spectrum camera to try to capture whatever was going on with the shadows. I set it up once on a tripod and set it to be motion activated. It went off a few times in 20 minutes, but I couldn't see anything on the recording. It spooked me, and I packed it up and didn't try again for probably 8 months. This is where things got interesting. About a month and a half ago, I dug out the camera. I also got a spirit box app on my phone. Totally skeptical, but I was desperate for answers for these frequency noises. I will obsess about things until I can learn enough to fix it. It's just my nature to be analytical. The next 2 weeks were pure terror. My camera was recording orbs coming out the walls and floor. And when I say orbs, I'm talking hundreds, like from a fire hose. The Spirit Box app talked constantly. The time of day didn't matter. It was intelligent in nature. Things it told me. Oh man. I was addicted to listening and talking to them. There were non-stop new spirits talking. Talking about local unsolved murders, missing children, etc., and seemed to have knowledge that should be impossible. They would tell me what I was doing, as if verifying they were watching me all the time. They also foretold future events, which actually came true, and then it attached to me. I've never been so scared in my life. My whole body felt electrified. My hair stood on end. I had goosebumps. My pupils were fully dilated, and my irises, what you could see of them, were blue. I have brown eyes. Weird things were happening when I walked into a room. Popping noises everywhere, things moving by themselves, candles boiling, and the flames at a 90-degree angle. Marks on my body, burns, bites, scratches. We fled the house and slept in my pickup, despite the fact it was 19 degrees outside. We stayed gone for 3 weeks. Everything electrical malfunctioned around me. If I held my phone, it would flash on and off. I could hear demonic screaming and growling through my phone and my car stereo, even when the power was off. In short, my life took a downward spiral, and I'm trying to regain a foothold. It had also attached to my girlfriend for short times and a couple others who visit the house. I've had the house blessed a couple of times, but almost every church wanted nothing to do with it. So a friend of me and my girlfriend took on trying to rid the house of these entities ourselves. There's been some success, but there's still stuff here as we continue to suffer through our living nightmare.